When this happened, I was 5 years old, and my mother was 27. We lived in a house that had been passed down to me from my grandparents, situated in a quiet corner of town with many elderly residents. To this day, I still reside here with my mother. It was a cold Christmas, and my mother and I went out shopping together. I was buying Christmas gifts for my family, and we visited several clothing stores and a hardware store in the mall. After the shopping was done, my mother took me to McDonald's to get some burgers and ice cream. As we left the mall through the south exit, we unexpectedly encountered a peculiar sight, an intriguing mall Santa standing at the exit. He wasn't clad in the traditional red and white costume, but wore tattered clothing, his face intermittently visible in the darkness. He waved at us, uttering unsettling greetings. Strangely, he knelt down, his eyes flickering with an eerie glow, asking me what Christmas gift I desired. Holding my mother's hand, I cautiously approached this frightening Santa. A sense of unease crept over me, but since my mother seemed oblivious to anything amiss, I dared not speak up. I told the terrifying Santa that I wanted a violin. My mother, surprised by this sudden interest in musical instruments, listened in astonishment. However, the horrifying Santa emitted a raspy laugh, sounding as though it emanated from the depths of hell. He stood up, fixing his gaze on me, and said, "If you hear the sound of the violin, it means you've received your gift." A chill ran down my spine, an indescribable fear enveloping me. My mother merely smiled faintly, seemingly unaware of the unusual atmosphere. We continued conversing with this terrifying Santa, who began to revel in praising my mother's appearance. His tone grew increasingly bizarre as he remarked, "Your mother is truly a beauty, little one. Did you know that?" My mother smiled, and I felt a sense of unease. The Santa continued, "Perhaps your mother will bring you a more special gift." His gaze sent shivers down my spine, and I began to regret following my mother into this horrifying scene. We continued our conversation with this terrifying Santa, discussing matters beyond my comprehension. He claimed to be part of the mall, but the aura he exuded felt more like it came from an evil dimension. My mother, on the other hand, seemed entranced, no longer perceiving the surrounding strangeness. Suddenly, the terrifying Santa spoke incomprehensible words, akin to chanting an incantation. I felt a strong dizziness, and everything around me became distorted and eerie. I tried to call out my mother's name, but my voice seemed to vanish into the darkness. Next, I found myself standing in a desolate landscape, surrounded by chaos. My mother was nowhere to be seen, and the terrifying Santa had vanished. A sense of despair and loneliness overwhelmed me, as if I had fallen into an endless nightmare. Time seemed to lose its track as I wandered in this desolate scenery, feeling lost. Suddenly, the sound of a violin reached my ears, a haunting and ominous melody. I shivered, as if an unseen hand was pulling at my soul. In this eerie vision, I struggled to find traces of my mother. However, everything became blurry and distorted, as if this was an inescapable nightmare. The sound of the violin grew increasingly piercing, and I felt as though I was about to be consumed by this terrifying melody. Just as I felt helpless, I abruptly woke up from this nightmare. I found myself still at the south exit of the mall, and my mother was smiling beside me. The terrifying Santa was nowhere to be seen, and everything returned to normal. A deep sense of fear gripped me, unsure if what had just occurred was a dream or reality. My mother and I continued strolling through the mall, but my psyche remained shaken by the recent experience. I could never forget the eerie sound of the violin and the bizarre actions of the terrifying Santa. Perhaps it was all a dreadful illusion, but the profound fear lingered in my heart, echoing the eerie melody in my ears when night descended. In the quiet suburbs, where every house wore a coat of fresh snow on Christmas Eve, I, a 6-year-old bundled with excitement, found myself immersed in the glow of my outdated TV screen, battling virtual enemies in a Star Wars PS1 game. The night held the promise of gifts and magic, but little did I know that true terror awaited me in the shadows of our new home. The dimly lit room was interrupted by the urge to answer nature's call. I sneaked out, mindful of the consequences of waking my mom. As I tiptoed back from the bathroom, a peculiar rustling sound reached my ears from the lower floor. The Christmas tree, I thought. Santa, perhaps? Fueled by curiosity, I descended the stairs, following the amplified sound of pine needles underfoot. Peeking into the living room, I glimpsed an eerie scene. The only illumination stemmed from a stranger's flashlight, revealing legs bent behind the Christmas tree. A black bag lay on the floor. As the mysterious figure emerged, he locked eyes with me, pressing a finger to his lips in a shushing gesture. "Yes, I'm Santa," he whispered. Instinctively aware that this wasn't the Santa I knew, fear overcame me, and I screamed for my parents. Panic gripped the intruder as he debated whether to flee with the bag of gifts. He darted toward the front door, leaving me in a state of shock. Moments later, my parents rushed down the stairs, the evidence of our narrowly averted disaster strewn on the floor. My father, donning slippers, embarked on a mission to confront the intruder. The stolen ornaments and the bag filled with gifts meant for us enraged and unsettled us. The back door, its wood splintered by a crowbar, testified to the intruder's unlawful entry. News later revealed that a nearby household had suffered a similar fate, confirming the work of the same individual. Though my recollection of that night is hazy, the trauma of a man invading our home, stealing our joy, and violating our sense of security lingers, a chilling memory from a Christmas Eve that continues to haunt me like a ghost from yesterday. In the years that followed, our family's fortress stood strong, a beacon of resilience in the face of adversity. The wounds from that haunting Christmas Eve gradually healed, but the indelible mark it left on our lives ensured we remained ever vigilant. Our home, once a simple haven, now bore the weight of our shared history, a testament to our triumph over the intrusion that sought to shatter our peace. As I grew older, the specter of that night continued to cast its shadow. The memories of the intruder's presence haunted my dreams, a reminder that safety is a fragile illusion easily shattered. Despite the passing years, the trauma persisted, an invisible scar that only those who lived through it could truly understand. Our family, once united in the joy of the holiday season, now carried a shared burden. The innocence of childhood had given way to a hardened resolve, an unspoken pact to protect one another. We became guardians of not just our home, but of the unwritten promise to never allow fear to extinguish the light that defined us. Each Christmas brought with it a dual celebration, a commemoration of the season's joyous traditions and a silent acknowledgement of our unyielding strength. The twinkling lights, once tinged with fear, became symbols of our resilience, casting away the darkness that threatened to engulf us. The intruder, though never apprehended, became a phantom of the past. Yet, his failed attempt to extinguish our festive spirit only fueled our determination to preserve the sanctity of our home. We became architects of our own security, experts in the art of safeguarding the precious moments that defined our family. As I stand on the precipice of another Christmas, I realize that the lessons learned from that harrowing night transcend the boundaries of time. The fortress that once shielded us from the unknown has transformed into a sanctuary of love, resilience, and shared strength. Our family story, though born from the shadows of fear, has become a tale of triumph. The intruder may have stolen a single Christmas Eve, but he failed to unravel the tapestry of warmth and togetherness that defined our lives. And so, each year, as we gather around the hearth, we carry not only the echoes of that chilling night, but also the unwavering light that guides us through the darkest of times. It was Christmas Eve, and the air was filled with a festive cheer that enveloped the small town of Everwood. The streets were adorned with twinkling lights, and the joyful laughter of children echoed through the crisp winter night. As I cozied up by the fireplace, a strange feeling crept over me, casting an eerie shadow over the merriment. As the clock struck midnight, a mysterious figure appeared on my doorstep. Tall and clad in a tattered cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it, the stranger raised a gloved hand to knock. Hesitant, I opened the door, and a shiver ran down my spine as I gazed into the empty void beneath the hood. I've been wandering these lands for centuries, the enigmatic figure spoke in a voice that sent chills down my spine. Tonight, I seek refuge in your humble abode. Unable to deny the stranger entry, I invited them in, and an inexplicable unease settled in the room. The stranger moved with an unnatural grace, the cloak trailing behind like a shadowy mist. As we sat by the fire, the flames danced and flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. With a voice that seemed to resonate from the depths of the unknown, the stranger began to recount a tale of a bygone era. A time when the line between the living and the dead blurred, and the spirits of Christmas past roamed freely. I was once a mortal, like you, the stranger began, their eyes piercing through the darkness. But I dared to meddle with forces beyond comprehension, seeking the secrets of the afterlife. As punishment, I was condemned to wander the earth until the end of time, a specter in perpetual solitude. I listened in rapt attention, the details of their story sending shivers down my spine. The stranger spoke of encounters with otherworldly beings, of spectral visions that haunted their every step. The room seemed to grow colder as the tale unfolded, and I could feel a presence beyond the veil of the visible world. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The stranger's gaze seemed to penetrate my very soul, and I questioned whether their intentions were benevolent or malevolent. Yet, an inexplicable curiosity compelled me to continue listening, to unravel the mysteries hidden within the folds of their haunting narrative. As the clock struck 3, the stranger rose from their seat, the cloak billowing like a phantom's wings. "I must depart now, for the night is waning," they intoned, and I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. Before vanishing into the shadows, the stranger turned to me with a gaze that held the weight of centuries. "Remember this night, mortal, for you have glimpsed into the abyss that separates the living from the dead," they whispered, and with that, they disappeared into the inky darkness, leaving me alone with the fading echoes of their enigmatic tale. The next morning, I awoke with a sense of disquiet lingering in the air. The events of the previous night felt like a dream, and I questioned whether the stranger was a mere figment of my imagination. As I strolled through the town, the festive atmosphere had returned, but a nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Years passed, but the memory of that peculiar Christmas Eve haunted me. Every December 24th, as the clock struck midnight, I couldn't help but glance nervously at the door, half expecting the enigmatic visitor to reappear and draw me once again into the realm of the supernatural. And so, the tale of the mysterious figure became a whispered legend in the town of Everwood, passed down from generation to generation. Was it a ghostly apparition, a time-traveling soul, or a figment of a fevered imagination? The truth remained elusive, hidden within the shadows of that chilling Christmas night. I never liked Christmas. For me, it's the saddest day of the year, as it reminds me of the loved ones I've lost. My father passed away when I was just a child, a firefighter sacrificed in a raging inferno. My mother succumbed to cancer when I turned 18. She was my closest confidant, always offering warm hugs and sweet smiles. With no siblings or close friends, only an uncle remained, a distant relative living in a remote town with whom I rarely communicated. Now at 25, I reside alone in a dilapidated apartment, working a mundane job, living an unremarkable life. Devoid of romantic relationships or friendships, I disdain socializing, finding people to be hypocritical and selfish. My only solace lies in reading. I immerse myself in the worlds within books, escaping the monotony of reality. I particularly favor horror novels, their thrills and chills providing a temporary escape from the mundane. Approaching this year's Christmas, I had no plans. I intended to spend it as I usually did, alone at home, reading, ordering takeout, and then sleeping. No Christmas tree, no gifts, no cards, no carols, no festive atmosphere. I did receive one letter, though, from my uncle. He invited me to spend Christmas with him, expressing a desire to see me and alluding to important matters and a surprise. Finding it strange, I hesitated but eventually declined, citing a busy schedule. I thanked him for the offer, explaining that I didn't want to disrupt his life and promised to call in the new year. I sent the letter and promptly forgot about it, deeming the meeting unnecessary and potentially burdensome for both of us. On Christmas Eve, after returning home from work, I turned on the television, hoping to find something entertaining. To my shock, a news report featured my uncle. He had been murdered in his home, and the perpetrator was still at large. The police were investigating, and his photo, displaying weariness and sorrow, flashed on the screen. A wave of indescribable emotions washed over me: grief, fear, guilt, apathy. I remembered his invitation, his desire to see me, to tell me something important, to give me a surprise. Regret flooded my senses. I wished I had accepted, spoken more to him, shown some care and respect. Turning off the television, I approached the window, staring into the night sky, contemplating my uncle's fate, my own, and the intricacies of life. A sense of emptiness, loneliness, despair, and helplessness engulfed me. I questioned the meaning of my existence, the direction of my future, and my inherent worth. I was just a lonely, sorrowful, bored, and useless individual. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, startling me. Unsure of who could be visiting at this hour, I cautiously approached and opened the door. To my greater surprise, it was my uncle standing there, donned in a red coat and a white hat, holding a large gift box. A radiant smile adorned his face, his eyes gleaming with excitement and anticipation. He greeted me, "Hi, nephew. Merry Christmas. I've come to bring you a gift. Can I come in?" It was Christmas Eve, and the frosty air nipped at our noses as my friend, Sarah, and I strolled down the festively adorned streets. The town sparkled with holiday lights, and the air was filled with the distant sound of carolers. We reveled in the joyous atmosphere, unaware that the night would take an unexpected turn into the supernatural. As we walked, exchanging laughter and warmth, a peculiar sensation prickled at the back of my neck. The once celebratory ambience now felt heavy and charged with an unexplained tension. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, hurtling towards us with an inexplicable urgency. My heart raced as the person, a silhouette of desperation, bore down on us. Panic seized me, but before I could react, the unthinkable occurred. The stranger passed through me as if I were made of mist. A bone-chilling coldness gripped my entire being as an ethereal force penetrated through my body, leaving me paralyzed in fear. Sarah's eyes widened with terror as she witnessed the bizarre event. The stranger, now on the other side, turned back to glance at me. His face, contorted with anguish, conveyed a story of unfinished business and unresolved pain. I stood there, a shell of my former self, as if my very essence had been violated. The encounter left me shaken to the core. The once familiar sounds of the holiday season now felt distant and muffled, drowned out by the echoes of that spectral intrusion. Sarah, though equally bewildered, attempted to console me, but the invisible breach had left an indelible mark on my psyche. Haunted by the ethereal encounter, I retreated to the solitude of my home. The warmth of my living room provided little comfort as I replayed the surreal incident in my mind. I questioned the nature of what had transpired. Was it a ghost, a spirit seeking solace, or something more sinister? As the clock struck midnight, a strange energy enveloped the room. Shadows danced on the walls, casting eerie shapes that seemed to whisper secrets of the supernatural. Every creak and groan of the old house echoed like the footsteps of unseen entities. Sleep eluded me as I tossed and turned, grappling with the surreal events of the night. In the midst of my turmoil, a spectral figure materialized in the dimly lit room. The same stranger who had passed through me earlier stood before me, his eyes pleading for understanding. With a trembling voice, he began to recount his tragic tale, a tale of betrayal, lost love, and an untimely demise. He spoke of a love unfulfilled, of promises broken, and of a life cut short by treachery. The details unfolded with vivid clarity, as if the room itself absorbed the weight of his words. The atmosphere became suffused with an otherworldly sorrow, and I found myself empathizing with the spectral figure before me. As his narrative unfolded, I became a reluctant confidant to a soul trapped between realms. His yearning for closure resonated with me, and an unspoken bond formed between the living and the departed. In that spectral communion, I understood the burden he carried and the reason he had reached out to me. Days turned into nights, and the haunting presence persisted. Together, we embarked on a journey to unravel the mysteries that bound him to the earthly plane. We delved into forgotten memories, traversed through spectral landscapes, and faced entities from the beyond. Our quest for closure became a shared endeavor, blurring the lines between the living and the dead. The town, once a haven of festive lights, now harbored unseen forces and secrets that transcended the material world. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, joined our quest, bridging the gap between the living and the spectral. Together, we navigated a realm where the ethereal intertwined with reality, and the boundaries of existence blurred. As the spectral figure's tale unfolded, we discovered the truth behind his untimely demise, a betrayal that transcended mortal boundaries. The quest for justice became a haunting odyssey, taking us through realms of darkness and echoes of forgotten sins. With each revelation, the bonds that held the spirit captive began to loosen. Our journey reached its climax on another cold, moonlit night. In the heart of the town, where the ethereal and the tangible converged, we confronted the forces that bound the spirit to the mortal realm. A spectral confrontation ensued, as the unresolved energies clashed with the living and the departed. In that supernatural maelstrom, I felt the weight of the spiritual realm and the echoes of centuries-old pain. The struggle between the living and the spectral mirrored the eternal dance of existence, where the lines between good and evil, right and wrong, became blurred in the ethereal tapestry of existence. As the climactic battle reached its zenith, a surge of energy enveloped the spectral figure. With a radiant glow, he ascended into a transcendent plane, his eyes reflecting gratitude and peace. The haunting presence that had tethered him to the mortal realm dissipated, leaving behind a sense of closure and resolution. The town, once shrouded in an otherworldly tension, returned to its festive splendor. The echoes of the spectral encounter lingered in the air, a testament to the thin veil between the living and the dead during that fateful Christmas Eve. In the aftermath of the supernatural ordeal, I found myself forever changed. The boundaries of my perception had expanded, and the realm of the unknown became an integral part of my existence. As Christmas morning dawned, the memories of the haunting encounters served as a reminder of the thin line between the tangible and the ethereal, a line that, during that spectral odyssey, had been momentarily erased.